Welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Bud Elliott. That's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson. Pac-12 South here for you on a Monday. Pac-12 fans, did you miss out on the North Division? Well, come on and get it loaded up in that feed. Pac-12 North was released on Friday. We also have the ACC Coastal and the ACC Atlantic. We've got Spotify playlists for those of you on Spotify. And so we're going to continue to build this library of information. I mean, this is stuff that's going to help you here in the first week of August. It's going to help you second week, third week. Before you know it, we're going to be here at week 0. Gentlemen, week 0, 26 days away, when Nebraska and Illinois are getting our season started. Tom, the biggest game of week 0 is the debut of Bret Bielema. How are you feeling about it? Has the calendar flipping to August really made it real for you? Because it made it real for me.
Yeah. It's it's exciting because it's things are just really starting to pick up. Like we've had to use, conference playoff talk and conference realignment talk to get us through. But like now, even if you just look at the NFL, there's a preseason game this week in the NFL, so that's always a sign. And then I was looking at the calendar yesterday. It's like, wow, couple more Saturdays to go. We're going to have actual football to watch, actual football to talk about. And of course, if you want to get a season started right, you have to do it with the preeminent college football program in the country. So of course, Illinois has to be in there.
Illinois plus 7. Go ahead and lock it up. The numbers are off. If you just want to go ahead and get in there, they got Nebraska overrated. All right. Anyway, but today is the Pac-12 South. Gentlemen, are you all ready to lock it up?
Let's do it.
Do it.
As much as I think the under is a safe play, like I can't even.
Count them up. Count them up. How many games are going to win this fall?
I can't fathom 8 wins.
How many games are going to win this fall?
I just can't. I don't see it. It's not on there. It's not the schedule I'm looking at. Unless there's another schedule somewhere.
So the way that we've been doing this so far is that we start with the win total on the board, which is the greatest, work our way all the way down. And it's the most interesting topic, or at least the toughest one to pin down is a number that's off the board right now. It is the Arizona State win total at Caesar Sportsbook. It's not there. You can still, I think, look at maybe some conference championship odds or some division odds, but that win total has been taken off the board. The number that I have pulled, courtesy of Vegas Insider, as it was posted on June 21st, is at 9. And that is the largest number that we're going to take here. So
For Arizona State?
For Arizona State.
I did find a current one. If you guys want to use it, you can bet.
There's
okay.
8.5 out there somewhere.
8.5 with even juice.
8.5 with. Do you want to use 8.5 for this? Because that's also the number we're going to have for USC. That's also the number we're going to have for Utah. It's very much representative of this top shelf of the division.
I think it's more current, and I think we should.
It makes me feel better.
Yeah,
8.5.
It's a real pick now.
Okay, so within this context, we're going to say, how much are you looking at the allegations of recruiting violations and anything that, might come down further? We've already had a staff member placed on administrative leave. Will there be players who end up getting caught up in this? We're going to dive into all that. But one of the reasons why Arizona State is near the top of this list is not only because you've got a very talented quarterback in Jaden Daniels. You've got a team that's really been building up. But I mean, I look at this non-conference, Southern Utah, UNLV, BYU. When you look at the cross division, they avoid Oregon and have kind of that nice Oregon State, Stanford, Washington State. Always nice to get those teams that we believe, based on the win totals, are probably going to be near the bottom of the North. So Danny, you said it makes you even more confident. Arizona State, we're setting it at 8.5 here for the podcast. Which way are you going?
I'm going to take the over. I am bullish on this team despite their issues. Now, some of this is a bet that this is going to take a while to play out. Like, there aren't going to be players that are ruled ineligible. I mean, we've already seen a coach. Was he dismissed or did he leave?
I thought it was administrative leave.
Yeah.
Administrative leave. That to me isn't that significant. Now, I would also, so this is the risk you run, because I would wait and get as much information as you can. But I think if there's good news about Arizona State, I think it's going to go up to 9, and then you're kind of, in a bad spot. But I do think this team, so we've seen teams before in the history of college football been dealt bad news, and they're still good teams, right? We've seen teams miss, potential playoff runs, bowl games, and still dominate, still even go undefeated and make claims to a national championship. So if it's some ruling like that, like they're not allowed to play in bowl season, they're not allowed to do, there was a bowl ban or whatever it is, I don't think it impacts them at all. I think they've got one of the better quarterbacks in the conference in Jayden Daniels, who's really dynamic, who's really exciting. I think they've been crushing it on the recruiting trails, which is a big problem why we are where we are. And you've heard a lot of coaches express concern about that. And I also think their schedule, like when I look at it every time, I see 8 wins that I feel really, really good about. I see 9 that I also feel good, but not great about. And I think the upside is there for this team to really break through and to possibly challenge USC for the division. But I do think these 2 teams, and we pair them with USC, I think they're the top of the South, and I think it'll be that way at the end.
I'm going under.
Yeah, I'm going under.
Yep.
Yeah. Danny's on a limb.
Yeah. Listen, when Danny said he had to make a call after the radio show, I was guessing it was to Herm.
Herm.
Yeah, I thought that Danny
it wasn't Herm.
Was it really? Oh, okay.
Call his boy.
No.
All right, so we got 3 unders and an over. Tom, do you want to take a stat? Because I've got 1 on-field and 1 off-field point that I want to make.
I mean, I don't think I'm going to actually bet this at any point just because there's way too much that's, that you can't really calculate. But like all that off-field stuff, you have to feel like it's probably going to have some kind of impact on the season, but it might be the impact where, the whole team kind of, us against the world rallies around it, goes out and has a great season. It's just, when I think of this Arizona State program under Herm so far, it's like that first season, like the expectations were so incredibly low. It was a hire that was mocked by most people. Like, what the hell are you doing? And then they really exceeded expectations, but they still only finished 7-6. And then the next year, expectations were raised and they disappointed, but they did improve. Last year, everything kind of got thrown out with COVID and, they finished 2-2. So it's like, I like Jayden Daniels. I've liked him for a while. I've hyped him up on this show for the last few years. I think they're a talented team. I think they have recruited well. It's just, there still seems to be a point in that program between talent and execution on the field that I haven't seen them quite hit just yet. And because of that, and because of the fact that they haven't won 9 games yet under Herm, and because of the fact that they have all that stuff going on off the field, I have to stay under, because there's a realistic chance that, the second half of the season is just a complete waste, as it's all interim coaches.
So Danny discussed how he thinks they have 8 wins that are basically locks, and another couple that he feels really good about. And I think that's really kind of the big difference between us two. For me, personally, I think if you see 8 guaranteed wins on this schedule, you kind of regarding them as like a top 10 caliber team, right? Maybe not a top 10 finish, but like one of the best top 10, top 11 teams in the country, probably. I'm more in that sort of 20 to 25 range for them. And so my number 7.9. So I'm going to go ahead and take the under here. I think Jayden Daniels has a lot of talent, and I don't know who you want to put this on, right? Maybe it's on the young receivers last year. Maybe it's on him. Maybe there's some combination of both. But man, they were very inconsistent throwing the football, and it's a 4-game schedule, right? And one of the games was an Arizona team that had basically just totally quit. But like, man, they were 100th in passing success rate last year nationally. That's pretty poor. And that's adjusted for opponent, obviously. So, they're not getting double credit for crushing an Arizona team that had basically quit. They would hit some explosive plays through the air, but man, just they could not move the ball consistently through the air. The other concern I have about them is their run defense. They were 119th in rushing success rate allowed last year. There's some teams on this schedule that can run the football kind of sneakily. I think BYU will still be able to run. At Oregon State is a team that can definitely, I think, run the football on them. Stanford may be able to run. So I'm a little bit questioning how many of those are locks. I think they'll trip up in one of those games, to be honest.
You don't think, worst case, they're 5-1 to start the season?
Let me pull up the actual order of the schedule.
Because they go Southern Utah, win. UNLV,
Win.
I'm giving them
That's a
win.
win.
I don't
UNLV
think
is not there
BYU
yet.
is going to be very good this year.
I agree.
I agree.
I think that's a win.
I think that's a win. Colorado at home, I think is a win. UCLA on the road, I think is one of the ones I would put as a 1, but I think they can beat Stanford at home. So I think they're 5-1 leading into a road game at Utah, which then it's a little bit more dicey. Then I've got Washington State as a win, and then they need to get one of USC Washington, and then I think they win Oregon State, Arizona. But that gets them to 10. Actually, I don't know. I think the team's closer to 9 than they are to 7.
See, I'm counting the other way. Like, instead of trying to count up the wins, when you're at the top of the board, I start looking for the losses. And when I see the schedule and I'm going at UCLA, at Utah, at Washington, and USC, that is a very, very tough proposition for me to think that you're going to be.
I think they get one of those. That's all they need.
But that gets us to 9-3. And so you think
which is an over.
Which isn't over, but you think there's no
they can't have a slip up.
Right.
Can't have a slip up. That would be like, and that goes to Bud's point of, if this is a top 10 team, you're you're locking those up. I see your point totally about back end 2025, where those games, you can think they're locks. We can write them W's when we're talking about it now, but the reality is the inconsistencies come into play and it makes them way more toss-up games.
And so for the NCAA stuff, I'm not concerned about penalties specifically in season. I'm concerned at the level of detail in this dossier. And I understand that, some of the coaching changes have been made, but I would not feel comfortable at the trust level within that program based on, what's going on. You get in trouble and then you're trying to figure out, where it came from, and everything was already secretive with the whole COVID recruiting operation. It's just not something that I'm not going to be betting this. I'm not going to be locking this up, but if we're giving gambling advice, that is built into my under, the idea that not only can I get 3 or 4 games that I think could be losses, but when we talk about no slip ups and no inconsistencies, if there's any kind of, if anybody is not on the same page as someone else, that could be the razor thin margin that we have in this division.
Yeah. And another thing too, to point out, if they're going to get to 9 wins, they have to, I think the 4 road games, UCLA, Utah, Washington, Oregon State, the 4 road games within the conference are going to be huge. You're going to have to win at least 2 of those to get to 9 wins. But the problem is, under Herm, in conference play on the road, they're only 4-7.
11-11 overall, 500 team against conference opponents so far. But hey, he gave us that Michigan State win. That was fun. Got us all going, got us all really excited. All right. So Danny riding with this guy fresh off a phone call for all the latest intel on the Sun Devils. 3 unders for.
I don't think Herm's talking to anybody in the media right now, just to be clear.
You're very, very correct about that. How many games are going to win this fall? That is the question for the USC Trojans. 8.5 as well, plus 105 to the over, minus 125 to the under. All right. So we've got San Jose State, BYU at Notre Dame is your non-con. They miss Oregon and Washington. You get Utah and UCLA both at home. Who wants to take first stab at this one? And I guess my question for which might be where we determine this over under win total is, how do you grade the Notre Dame game?
As a loss?
A definite loss? I found myself questioning that. And I started really looking at this USC team. I said, I think they if Slovis is playing to what we imagine he can be, the best of Keaton Slovis is put together for, let's say, 10 out of the 12 games. If one of them is up in South Bend, I think USC can win that game.
I don't think it's a definite loss. I think it's their most likely loss. If you just go percentage wise of outcomes for their games, I think that's the one they're most likely to lose. But I don't care, because I'm still going way over.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Because I look at the schedule and I understand there's the USC disappointment factor, which is obviously going to play a role in the way that the team is viewed on the market. There's the fact that Clay Helton is not a good coach factor, which is obviously going to limit the ceiling of this team. But I look at this schedule and I look at the talent that USC has, and yeah, I know we've probably all fallen in this trap a million times already, and it seemingly happens every year. And I'm not going to sit here and say USC is winning the Pac-12 or USC is a playoff contender, but to get to 9 wins, Yeah, like what are the games? Like Notre Dame is the most losable game on this schedule, and that's not even like a 90-10 kind of loss. That's more of a 60-40, 65-35 kind of loss. And I look at the rest of the schedule, there are no real like no chance in hell games. Like you get Utah at home. You've got Arizona State on the road, but it's late in the season, as we just went over. Who knows what Arizona State's even going to be at that point? You get Cal on the road, that'll be tough, but you get UCLA at home, you get BYU at home, you get Arizona, Utah, Oregon State, Stanford at home. I have if this team loses 4 games, then, Clay Helton's got to be fired. So I guess I can't lose, really.
Ditto for a lot of what you said. I think that in the Pac-12, your cross division draw is huge because you played 9 conference games. You're going to play 2/3 of the other division. And when the 2 teams that you missed from the other division are Oregon and Washington, that is a favorable draw. This is an easy over for me as well.
Kudos to the Pac-12 for finally figuring out how to schedule to make sure that your good teams are good.
Give me the under.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'm not buying in. I think teams are slowly starting to kind of get a better read on what USC is doing on offense. I know Slovis was hurt at times last year, but their passing efficiency throughout the season kind of dropped some. People basically just started dropping 8 and daring to run the football. I don't think this is a very physical football team. And I'm just not into buying, overs on these other teams in this division. Like you'll see coming up, there's some other teams that I think are basically on a similar level with, in some cases, easier or similar schedules. So for me, it's the under on USC. What games for them are like no doubt locks that you're very confident a Clay Helton coached USC football team. These are absolutely locks. Like Arizona at home, I think so. San Jose State, I agree. Stanford at home,
yeah,
probably what 85% maybe.
Yeah,
okay. Oregon State,
yes,
I think so. But like they've screwed up and lost to worse opponents than that before at home. BYU, I was going to say yes, but it is the last game of the season, so BYU might have its stuff together by then.
Playoff spot at stake for USC.
Right. Well, exactly. At Cal,
they're screwed if that's the case.
At Cal,
that's tough.
At Colorado,
that that's one of the wild cards that I guess we're going to get to later in the show. It's like Colorado obviously exceeded expectations last season for all of us. I don't know how much stock to put into that last season yet.
I think this is an 8-4 football team. So I'm going to go ahead and take the under.
Our number's 9, right?
8.5.
Okay, it is 8.5. All right. I love the over on this one all day long. I will give Bud some credit, though, for being the only one of you guys on this. We're becoming the Fire Clay Helton pod, which I'm not comfortable with, but you guys are. But at least Bud's willing to stick to his convictions. But I think this is my most confident bet in the Pac-12, I would say, is take the over 8.5 on this one. I think when you go over the games, when we talk about, you guys know the priority I put on quarterbacks, and I know the offensive line was a problem in the spring. I feel like that's a position, even though as a Florida State guy at a team that struggled with this for 4 years now, I feel like it's something you can iron out, you can protect somewhat, getting the ball out of his hands quickly. But I still think this team has more talent. How many games of this? And then this is where Bud has the conviction to say, hey, well, Clay Helton's going to be that poor. They're going to have better talent on the field every game except for one. That's Notre Dame.
Probably,
anybody else? Is anybody else close to them? Arizona State? Maybe.
No, not for top end talent.
But has the talent been developed?
I think it's developed to a point where they can win these games. They can get their 9 wins. Now, can it win a national championship? And would I pick them as a dark horse for a title or even a playoff spot? No, because I think the Pac-12 is going to do Pac-12 things, and you're going to have, probably 2 9-3 teams, maybe 1 10-2 team in the conversation at the end of the year. So, but I think this team is good enough to win 9 games. That's all I need. I think this is one of the safer plays out there.
And they don't have any Friday night road games after a Saturday huge game against, like one of the top teams in the conference.
or like 10 straight weeks with no buys.
Well, they
Do
do have
feel that much differently if they were 6-0 last year and had stamped it and like not had a disappointing loss in the like at the end of the year.
No.
Like if they started actually dominating Pac-12 teams on a consistent basis, yes, I would absolutely feel differently.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Count them out.
The Utah Utes over/under win total set at 8.5, -120 to the over, +100 to the under. Weber State at BYU at San Diego State, non-con, a couple of roadies in there, but all right, we'll get to it. Washington State, Oregon State, Stanford, and Oregon is your draw from the north. I look at it and I see 3-0, and I understand that 2 road games, that might be a little tough. If you want to push back on it, I will just counter with my belief in this Utah team and sort of buying that stock. Washington State, Oregon State, Stanford, Oregon. I kind of got that one 3-1 against the North in that run of 4 games. And so I posed the question that I found myself asking 3 teams in this division, which is funny. I say, can you go 3-2 against your division? Because this is a division where I've got Utah, Arizona State, USC, and UCLA all very closely rated together. Big drop down, and then you go to Colorado and Arizona. Can Utah go 3-2 against division opponents when you are going to get 2 of them? I believe Colorado and Arizona. Can you get 1 out of USC, UCLA, and Arizona State? I think that answer for Utah is an emphatic yes. I'm going over 8.5.
I'm right there with you, man. Over for me. I've already bet them for the division at +475 earlier. I think it's dropped a little bit now. I did the Around the Clock episode with Steve Bartle from our Utah 24/7 sports site. I think this is a physical football team. Their offensive line should have better continuity. I am not buying into the Connor Brewer hype quite as much as Utah fans are, because he was, I guess, perfect in the spring game, and I don't really care about that
As noted
much.
on the Cover 3 podcast.
Yeah, 15 for 15, man. I'll never forget it.
Gosh, but I am buying in that he's an improvement over what they had last year. They should be really good again on defense. This is one I like. Give me the over.
We like Andy Ludwig, offensive coordinator there. It's pretty good. And they got, obviously tragedy with, the death of Ty Jordan, but they went to the transfer portal and picked up a couple of options that I think are going to be able to help them. So, yeah, awesome. Bud's on. Anybody else on? Or are we going on the other side?
I'm on the over. I'm not going to pull in all overs in the Pac-12 South, but this is the 3rd over in a row. I think Charlie Brewer is a massive improvement from what they've had over the last several years. And Kyle Whittingham, this program, have an identity. Like, I think sometimes you struggle and you see changes at coordinator and you see changes along, position coaches leave and you see, trying to recruit differently. They know exactly what they want. They want to play really good defense. They want to run the football. They want to work in some play action pass. But their defense, once again, is going to be physical. They're going to be able to shut some teams down, run game, make them one-dimensional. I think they're the Wisconsin of the Pac-12, and they just surprise people every year, and they're in the conversation in November, and they could possibly, make it in the Pac-12 championship game. And if you separate Kyle Whittingham's first 3 years when they just joined the conference and were trying to figure out their way, since those first 3 years, around 9 wins has been the floor. 8 wins has been, worst case scenario. I know they had a 7-win season, but feel pretty safe. Like you're going to get a product that's going to be around this number. You might not win this bet, but you're not going to lose embarrassingly bad. It's not going to be like, I can't believe I was so wrong on Utah. So I like those odds. Give me a team that I can feel like is going to be in this conversation late. So I'll take the over.
Finally, I'm on my own. I'm on the under. It's not like a super high confident pick. I'm not going to bet it, but the way I look at things, I think 8-4 is more likely than 9-3. Like Chip, you mentioned you think they're going to go 3-0 in non-conference, and I think that they easily could. It's just that 2 of those non-conference games are on the road. BYU and San Diego State, who are 2 respectable non-conference opponents, and you're not at home for either of those. So early in the season, that kind of stuff, wouldn't be surprised if somebody slips up and screws up, and having them in back-to-back weeks, especially, I think has an impact. I think if you look through the rest of the schedule, you get Stanford on the road on a short week. Like you play UCLA at home on Saturday, the day before Halloween, and then on Friday night you're playing Stanford on the road, and then the week after that you're on the road against Arizona. So it's like, well, I think Stanford and Arizona on the road are easily in a vacuum are winnable road games. The circumstances in which Utah has to play them, kind of suspect. And then you've got Oregon the very next week, which I think is, if you look at the schedule, I think even Oregon at home is going to be a more difficult game for Utah than USC on the road, because at least that USC game, Utah is coming off a bye. Meanwhile, for USC, I think it's like their 6th game in a row without a bye. So, USC could easily be kind of banged up for that one. But then after you play Oregon and you likely lose and you might get beat up a little bit, you're again on a short week having to play that next Friday against Colorado to finish the regular season. So I look at this Utah team as being well coached. I've got Ludwig on my, draft cover 3 coaching draft team. I love Kyle Whittingham. I love what this program has done. It's just when I look at all these extenuating circumstances, I don't think Utah is talent-wise at a level where it's like I can just assume they're going to win these games and not look at the kind of maybe potential pitfalls that await them with this schedule. So I think 8-4 is more likely than 9-3. I'm going under.
Tom, what do you make Utah at BYU in week 2?
I think that should be a Utah win because, as we've talked about, the BYU team we're going to see in 2021 is going to be completely different than the BYU team we saw last year, not just in personnel, but also in a step up in class and who BYU has to play. That said, it's still BYU Utah, and it is in Provo, and it is a huge rivalry. So, we've seen crazy things happen in those rivalries. So I think Utah should probably be about a touchdown favorite.
Yeah, I made it 9. I bet the 6.5 like 3 weeks ago. I think that's one of our differences as to why I like the over more.
Yeah, 2 points. that builds
but
up
it adds up. I mean, if it's 2 points
over a course of a season, 2 points adds up a lot.
100%. Coming up on the other side, we take a look at a big year for Chip Kelly and the Bruins. Colorado in year 2 with Carl Durrell, and Arizona. New man in charge is Jedd Fisch, plus college football playoff. We had an expansion announcement. We seem to have the format. We debated it. We talked about it. And now there's a little bit of pushback. So what do we think about the future of college football playoff expansion based on what we've been hearing in the wake of conference realignment? All that and more next. This Caesars had a set with, a whole bunch of just nice halves, but we do have one round number here. And it's for the UCLA Bruins. I've got them at 7 with minus 110 on either side. Non-con is Hawaii, LSU, Fresno State. From the north, they draw both Washington and Oregon. Then Cal at home, Stanford on the road. What do we think about the Bruins? Another team that I found myself saying, can you go 3-2 against division opponents?
I think push is what's going to happen, but when given the choice of having to choose between 6-6 and 8-4, this is one of those scenarios where I think UCLA is going to be a better team than its record suggests, because I do think that they are being somewhat flying a little bit under the radar, because they did look, and again, in the Pac-12 last year, who knows, but they did look solid last season. They did look like that was a program that was finally getting to what Chip Kelly was hoping to be, and it was finally starting to look like the team that we thought it was going to be. But like you mentioned, Chip, the schedule is
tough,
ridiculous. Like, you get LSU in your second week of the season, then you get a bye. So you're using a bye in the third week of the year just to recover from that LSU game. Fresno State at home, that's a decent non-con game, but you should win. But then you've got Stanford on the road, Arizona State at Arizona, which is kind of another maybe possible bye, but it's on the road. But then you get at Washington, Oregon, at Utah. And those 3 games are the toughest 3 games of that stretch, obviously, and at their very back end of that stretch. So I could easily see them in that 7 game stretch. I could see them going 3-4. I could see them going 2-5, depending on how something's breaking. While the finish of the season is a little more convenient with Colorado and California and USC on the road sandwiched in between, that's going to be one of the tougher schedules in the Pac-12. So I think UCLA is a team that could be good, and it might be one of the better teams in the conference. It's just I don't think its record is going to reflect that. I think 6-6 is more likely than 8-4. Again, push, but I'm going under.
Tom with the under.
Over. But I agree with the premise. I count this up and I see 7-5. I'll give them Hawaii and Fresno State. LSU's a loss. Washington, Oregon, Cal, Stanford. I'm going to say it's 2-2. And I'm going to say, hey, I don't think UCLA is actually, I can look at this right now. When Oregon comes to town, Oregon will be favored against UCLA, but I don't think it will be a number that is going to make it a wild upset if UCLA takes down the Ducks at home. I think that they are on a neutral field, a touchdown apart, maybe less than that, maybe 6 points apart. And so I'm going to give you 2-2 against your Pac-12 North. Can you go 3-2 against division opponents? I'll give you Colorado. I'll give you Arizona. And I think you can get one of your Utah, USC, Arizona State. So, 2, 3, that's right at 7. But because of my general overall confidence in this team, I'm going to go with an over here.
I got the under. Partly because I had to, because I don't want to have all overs. But I also think 7. I mean, it better be 7. What if it's not?
Like if it's 6 and 6,
Kelly,
do you think?
I think 6 and 6, but I still think 6 and 6. I mean, this is a program that Jim Mora was doing a pretty good job. I mean, they were making bowls. Like, it wasn't that bad. Now they've been in rough shape. To me, it comes all down to the schedule. Like in the other teams we talked about, when we were talking about USC, Arizona State, Utah's like, oh, they dodge Oregon. They dodge Washington. Guess who plays them both? UCLA does. So, I would love to see Chip Kelly, have a breakout year. I would love to see it. The offense has gotten better, but I don't know if it's enough of an edge anymore to go fast, to spread the field, all the things that were really innovative when he brought them to Oregon. I just don't know if it's that much of a difference now. And I was really bullish on this team. I remember we were doing a podcast. I was like all in on UCLA because they only lost to Oregon by 3. They were in a game late with USC. One of their losses to Stanford was in overtime. Like, they were in every game within a possession.
All 4 losses by 6 points or less.
Yeah. So I was all on them. The schedule is really hard to find 8 wins for me. So I'm going to take the under.
Man, I must be looking at a different schedule, to quote Barton, because I love the over here. This will be a bet for me. I think they should make this 7.5. I think we are. I don't know. I've been in my head. I've been trying to figure out what you guys really don't like about this team, and I think you have a situation here where, and we probably just have different numbers, but I don't think they're a double-digit underdog in any game, right? So we can sit here and we can say, okay, LSU loss, at Utah loss, Oregon loss, at USC loss, at Washington loss. But I think they're probably going to go, 2 and 3 in that stretch, personally. Those aren't games where they're going to be dogs of 14 or 21 points or something like that. Like, they'll probably be dogs between, they might be favored in some of those, by the way, but if to the extent that they will be underdogs in any of those games, I think you are probably looking at a situation where they're dogs of 4 points, 6 points, 8 points. That means they're going to hang around in the majority of those games, I suspect. And, at Stanford, not a tough place to play, really. At Arizona, I mean, if you got to go play a road game, that's not a bad place to go play, I guess. Cal at home, I'd probably rather get Cal at home. I think this is an 8-win football team. This is one of the ones I like quite a bit. I think they made improvements last year, kind of behind the scenes. It's also an extremely experienced football team. I am working on a project right now where I look at the attrition of all these guys that were hired in 2018, because that was the first year of the early signing period. And Chip Kelly's Bruins are a full standard deviation higher as far as retaining the roster than anybody else out there. So
better at it?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they have their guys who have been in his system now. This is their 4th year in his system. I think 77% of that first recruiting class for Chip is still around. And I mean, you have successful programs even like Texas A&M, which is at 30%, right? They've had a 70% attrition rate after just 3 years. UCLA has a lot of these guys on the roster. I think getting Jay Toya back from Michigan was really big for them, as we discussed, I think couple weeks ago, like he was going to be Michigan's starting nose guard, and because he didn't think he was allowed to transfer to UCLA, and once he realized he was allowed to transfer to UCLA, he got back. Like that's a big piece for them in the middle. I think this team can win the South. I don't think they will, but like I'm going over for sure.
So if I moved it to 8, would you still feel like? Do you think that there's a 9-3?
No, probably not. I would honestly, like if you moved it to 8, I think 7 is more likely than 9.
Mm-hmm.
I think the proper number here is probably like 7.5 with some juice to the under.
And then you would still say take the over because you think this is an 8-4 football team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm out on a limb. Like I could totally get pantsed on this one, guys, because like you guys made some good points. Shit, what am I looking at?
Hey, I'm with you. I'm on the over.
This is true. Yeah, but you're not like, I'm gonna bet this thing on the over. You're like, all right, I'll take the over.
Yeah. It's because I think it's a good football team. They got some of the highest like returning production in the entire country. They've, got everything seem to be moving in the right direction. I give you a good chance at some of these games that are potentially going to be L's. How many games are going to win this fall? The new CBS Sports 130 was released on Monday, the preseason rankings, and I compared them to the final postseason rankings. I mean, Colorado just nosedived. No respect for Colorado, and that seems to line up with the odds makers who have taken this Colorado Buffs team and given them a 4.5 with it juiced to the under, plus 100 to the over, minus 120 to the under. But man, in terms of like Pac-12 non-cons, you got Minnesota and Texas A&M to go with Northern Colorado. Then Danny, like you mentioned earlier, all these other teams that avoid Oregon and Washington. Well, guess what? You get at Oregon, Washington at home, at Cal, Oregon State at home. Who wants to take first stab at Colorado?
Well, Tom's wearing a Colorado hat today. So if you're not following us on YouTube, youtube.com/cover3.
I thought this was where you're coming on the other side of Utah, that you're going to come here with a Colorado over, where, some of those games that I've just been burying the Buffs as we work our way through the division. This is where Tom has his revenge.
Let's hear it.
Under.
Yes.
Like I wore the hat to let him know that I still support him. It's just, I don't have high hopes because like last year they went 4-2, but you need to take a closer look. Like one of those wins was against UCLA in the very first game of the season at like 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning. And it was a sloppy, crazy game. They won 48-42. Their other wins were Stanford, which wasn't great last season, but even so, early in the season, they were really bad. And then they kind of figured it out as the year went along. They beat San Diego State, which cool, respectable, but still it was a 20-10 game. And they beat an Arizona team that was really bad. Kevin Sutherland got fired. And then when they had to step up in class against a Utah and a Texas, they not only lost both those games, but they lost the first one by 17. They lost the second one by 32. So it's like there was clearly a gap. So like, as you mentioned, Chip, you look at that and then you look at their schedule. They opened with Northern Colorado, which is an FCS program, and it is the only program on their schedule that is not a Power 5 opponent in 2021. The other two non-conference games are Texas A&M in Denver and Minnesota in Boulder. I don't see them beating A&M. I think Minnesota is probably a loss, although it could be a win, but I think that's more of a 50-50 because I don't think what we saw from the Gophers last year was really all that accurate a depiction of what that team is. So then you've got Arizona State on the road and USC before your bye. Those could be losses. When I'm looking through, I'm going through, it's like I'm trying to find the wins. Arizona at home, okay. Obviously the Northern Colorado. Oregon State at home, maybe. Those are the three games I feel like I can confidently say Colorado's got a really decent chance of winning. I don't know where the fourth game that they have a really decent chance of winning is. And if I can't find a fourth win, that means it's going to be really difficult to find a fifth win to justify going over this total. So under. I'm sorry, Buffs. I love you.
I think Colorado will be a narrow underdog at Cal, but that could be toss up. But
I mean, it's going to be low scoring, so they can't be too big of an underdog. But I just.
Oh, and no quarterback. You still got Jarek Broussard back, so congratulations. You've got a first-team all-conference running back, but you got changeover at the quarterback position. Yeah, Yeah, Tom, I'm with you. Under.
I'm just going to get out of the way real fast on this one. I had this 48% going under, 52% going over. You got to pay $1.20 to go over. It's even money to the under. So that's like 0.5% better as far like I'm going to lose money either way based on my predictions here if I'm betting this because I just don't see an edge. It's a good number in my opinion. I think Tom made some really good points about how much do you want to bank on those games they won in the first 2 weeks? I don't know. They also played Stanford early, and Stanford early was an absolute disaster. San Diego State, Utah or Arizona was really collapsing down the stretch. At that point, they knew Kevin Sumlin was going to be fired, I believe, because that was on December 5th. Give me the under here. I think there's some potential regression coming. I'm continue to be kind of worried about the run defense. They were 8th in rushing success rate, but 127th in rushing explosiveness allowed, which is hard to do. It's almost like, hey, let's sell out for the run every time, but then there's no second or third line, I guess. There was only 127 teams that played football last year. So they were literally dead last in the country in explosive runs allowed. Passing game was basically a 0 for most of the year. I'm not going to bet this, but if I have to pick one for the show, which I do, just go ahead and give me the under very slightly.
Give me the under. Make it another one. They better watch out for Northern Colorado. The father-son duo.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
With Dylan McCaffrey at the helm at quarterback. Watch out for a week 1 upset. I forgot about that.
Do we have numbers on that yet?
McCaffrey was on Sirius XM with me on NFL radio. Like he was on there all the time. And then he took this job. And I think he might've been doing the radio show a little bit longer. But yeah, Dylan McCaffrey went to go play with him. I think this program is going to have, and it's really a reflection of the uncertainty and just turmoil at the top because Mel Tucker was there for a year, then takes the job at Michigan State. And it was really an admirable job to get the season they did last year. But much like we've said about the Pac-12, you can't take much of last year. And we all said this, like you're probably best off in the Pac-12 week by week, waiting, getting more information because it is going to be a total crapshoot. There are so many uncertainties. We don't know what last year meant. And I think last year was more of a smokes like it wasn't the reality of what Colorado is as a program right now. Schedule's brutal. I say take the under.
I can't find a line for the Northern Colorado game yet.
I would hope they would blow them out. But if they don't, oh my goodness, watch it.
So Ed already has Dylan. Would he have taken Luke, or is that further representation of what Luke's actual ceiling is that he shipped him over to Mike Bloomgren, former Stanford offensive coordinator at Rice?
And he probably told him to transfer.
Yeah.
You know,
Scott Satterfield said, no, you're not playing quarterback. All right.
Count them out.
Jedd Fisch takes over that Arizona program that we have been discussing. They also have a directional in the non-con, Northern Arizona. BYU and San Diego State also on the non-con. When I look at the rest of the schedule, when we have an over-under win total of 2.5, I'm looking at -110 to either side. Are there 3 wins for the Arizona Wildcats in 2021? I've got 3 possibles, but I do not think it's likely. I'm going to be going under. I'll give them Northern Arizona, Washington State on the road, maybe, Cal at home, maybe, and there's too much emphasis on the maybe for me to think that they get them both. So I'm going under.
Going over.
All right. Talk to me.
I think Northern Arizona is a win. I think BYU to open the season in Las Vegas is not an impossibility either, because I think, as we've gone over a few times, this BYU team is not exactly going to be the same team we saw last year. But more than anything for me, I just don't think Arizona is as bad as it looked on the field the last couple of years. I think that the coaching change, and we've never seen Jedd Fisch as a head coach, so we don't know if it's going to be an improvement. But I just feel like the situation with that team on the sidelines the last couple of years clearly bled through to results on the field. And I don't think this is a bottom feeder program. I think that there's enough talent on that roster where if there's a little bit more coherence on game day and a little bit more, consistency, this isn't a team that's going to go bowling, but I think this is a team that can get to 4 wins, maybe even 5 in the Pac-12 is in the, where there's, they get Colorado on the road. That could be a win. I think they're going to pick up a couple wins along the way that maybe some people didn't expect. They're not going to be great, but they're not going to be bottom feeders like they were last year.
I don't think highly of BYU, and I still think BYU is favored by like 8 points in that game.
BYU is favored by.
Is that line out?
Oh, I don't know. I was just I was presenting that even though I don't love BYU, I still have them a touchdown tier ahead of Arizona.
Yeah,
they're
BYU,
favored by 11.
By 11. Oh well.
Again, my numbers do not like BYU as much as the market's numbers at this point.
I'll be right back. Hold on.
Yeah. I'm going to go over as well. Personally, I do not see much of a chance to get to 4 wins here. I think that's not super likely, but I think that they're probably 54% to hit the over, as opposed to like 46% to hit the under. I think we have another situation here where, for the most part, these Pac-12 teams are more closely bunched than we want to maybe acknowledge or believe. I don't trust a whole lot of what happened last year. I mean, Kevin Sumlin, that was an absolute disaster there. There is potential for a new coach to come in and I think get these guys to play at a higher level. And that's not even, I don't know if Jedd Fisch can coach at all, but I don't think that he's going to be anywhere near as bad as what Kevin Sumlin was with what he had going on. So can you get me 2 of San Diego State, Cal, BYU, Colorado, Washington State? I think you can go 2 and 4 in that stretch, plus Northern Arizona to get to 3. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and take the over. They also took 12 transfers, by the way. Not all those kids will hit. Hell, I bet you some of those kids aren't even on scholarship. But if you get a couple transfers that hit, you're not going to win a national title with it, but you could probably do a decent job of getting to 3 wins.
What grade did we give the Jedd Fisch hire? Do you guys remember? I mean, I don't know if we graded it, but
Wasn't the high?
It wasn't
one.
super high.
This was one of the more perplexing hires to me of the offseason carousel. And then it's almost like he tried to replicate some of what happened at Arizona State when he brings back Chuck Cecil and he brings back Ricky Hundley and he brings back Teddy Bruschi to play a role and like an ambassador. And a coach who he's hopped from place to place to place throughout his career. He's inheriting a mess and it's a massive turnaround. I think this is one of those lines that begging you to take, they've got to get 3 wins. And then at the end of the year, you're like, what happened to this program? I think this is a tough job as it stands. And I don't love it. This isn't one of my most confident ones, but I'm going to take the under. I just think this one's begging you to take the over. And I don't feel confident like saying, hey, there's an easy 3 wins, an easy 4 wins. I think it's going to be tough. So I think this one you might be sweating out late. And if it comes down to an Arizona State, a rivalry game, or a Washington State, I mean, even down the stretch, they better get the 3 wins early. Because if they don't, I mean, you're looking at a 6-loss finish potentially. The Washington State game is the one that you'd have to get.
I think that while I haven't really set expectations for Jedd Fisch in the big picture, I could see this being one of those situations where you pull up a head coach's Wikipedia and in that very first entry of a job, it's like an offer in conference play. And you say, oh yeah, he took over a mess. Oh yeah, there was everything that happened around that turnover. And then things might stabilize. So I would not be surprised to see an 0-9 in Pac-12 play and have it maybe not even be panicky. Maybe he has things moving in the right direction, but all right. So we got 2 overs and 2 unders on Arizona. I think even if you're betting to the middle, I would be surprised if Arizona is closer to that middle group of the Pac-12. I think I've still got them with the ways, a lot of distance to go before they get there. All right. Before we get out of here, I wanted to pitch this maybe first as a question, but then also want to see how everyone is reading the tea leaves, having discussions on the current situation. So Pac-12 Commissioner Kliavkov, George Kliavkov?
Yep.
Right? Yeah, George. George Kliavkoff at Pac-12 Media Days really starting to bring the attention on the way that the college football playoff expansion was put together, the way that it seems to be moving along the process pretty quickly, and has, offered the suggestion, and many others around college athletics seem to be jumping on board as well with saying like, hey, let's not force this thing through, especially with so much uncertainty around realignment. So, what do we think is the impact on the college football playoff from realignment? And how do you think things are shifting in terms of the way things are going to play out over the next 3, 4, 5 years?
Well, I think that this is most likely going to slow down the expansion to 12. Just in talking to people with some conferences, including where I was at with Media Day, they were like, that 12 thing ain't done. Like, it's likely, but it's not done. And then when the Texas Oklahoma stuff broke, they're like, yeah, because they know that Greg Sankey was on that committee that was working on going to 12, and so was Bob Bowlesby. Mm-hmm. And I think it was George Kliavkoff who said, look, not everybody was working with the same set of facts and information here. 12 made sense for the set of facts and situations that we believed that we had at the time that we were coming up with this proposal. We don't know if it still makes sense now. And he also brings up the point, like, why are we letting ESPN just have this? Why would we not take this thing to market and allow multiple networks to bid on it, which would almost certainly get you more money? Now, if you're the SEC, you'd like ESPN to have it because you're already really in bed with them at this point. They're going all in. They're probably not going to have as much money, in my opinion, to bid on the Big Ten, which sets up well for Fox or any other network, or maybe CBS, who knows, that wants to come in and bid, because ESPN can't own every conference out there, right? Eventually they're going to. Sure. Yeah. Right. Exactly. But like, because of how much they're going to have to pay now for the SEC and likely the college football playoff, they're going to have a little less money to bid on some of these other leagues. And I think these other leagues would like to see multiple different broadcast partners have a piece of the college football playoff. I know Gene Smith, the Ohio State athletic director, made some comments on this as well. And it's a weird conundrum to me, because if you're one of these other conferences, you would like to see that additional money from the playoff. So it's not 100%. No way, we're not going to 12. No, we hate you guys. We won't do this, because there's still that, well, damn, when we expand the playoff, we're going to make more money, right, per team. And they would like to have that cash. I just think right now they're taking a little step back and saying, is this really the right solution for what we have? Do we need 5 or do we need 6 auto bids for conference champions now? Like the 6 highest conference champions, if you have the Big 12 stay at 8 teams who don't recruit like a Power 5? There's a lot of questions like that still need to be answered.
Yeah, I think what the thing you touched on there is the more interesting thing, is whether or not it happens quicker or it takes longer, or, it throws things completely out the window. I think that one of the ironies of this could be that, ESPN, which has made all its decisions within its college football realm around the college football playoff since the inception of the college football playoff, could, by now kind of allegedly helping Oklahoma and Texas see the light about joining the SEC and combining forces, ESPN could, an unintended consequence of this for ESPN is that it could end up costing ESPN its exclusive rights to the college football playoff. Now, maybe ESPN doesn't see that as a terrible thing, because maybe they're like, well, they could save some money by not having to pay for it exclusively. But I don't know. I do think that if you are the Big Ten and you are the Pac-12 and you're conferences that have deals with other networks, and you feel like ESPN and SEC are consolidating a little too much power, it probably is within, your realm of what's good for you to bring it out to the market. So if you're sitting at that table trying to negotiate an expansion, you might be more inclined to stall those negotiations just to get through the current deal so they can hit the open market and see what happens and, spread things out. So I know I said last week I didn't think this would have too big of an impact on expansion, because I do still think it's coming, but those are some factors that I think could be at play. So we could just have like an ultimate game of chicken here between the conference commissioners. And it's really, we don't know a lot about George Kliavkoff. We don't know a ton about Kevin Warren yet, because his first year at the Big Ten was just, welcome to your new job. Here's a pandemic. Yeah. But it's important. We got to realize too, like, Warren has an NFL background, And if this is a sport that is heading more towards what is going to be like a minor league NFL kind of product, maybe
Multiple broadcast partners.
Maybe, yeah, they've got multiple broadcast partners in the NFL. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And then, of course, we've got a new commissioner at the ACC, too, who has plenty of connections in the Big Ten, and Jim Phillips. But now he's got, ACC's interests in mind. So it's going to be interesting what he thinks is best for his new conference.
As somebody who was really, and I said, we were doing one of our preview shows on CBS Sports HQ. I was with Chip, and I said, I think this could happen in a year. Like Texas, Oklahoma get to the SEC. And even here on the podcast, I've said, man, I think this happens sooner rather than later. And then all of a sudden it comes screeching to a halt when Bowlesby sends his letter and you realize his tactic. And now you've got Kliavkoff saying, hey, we're going to slow this down. While I feel like it came to a screeching halt, it could be sped up really, really fast. For instance, what if, and I get the slow play, but if you're one of those remaining 8 in the Big 12, I mean, are you really willing to just sit around and wait and collect those checks? Or are you investigating all avenues? If you're a Pac-12 school, are you just going to sit there and follow the commissioner's lead who's brand new and say, sure, we'll just kind of slow play this. We'll wait. I feel like because it caught everyone so off guard, no one had any contingency plans. And so everyone's so I feel like it'll still be slower, but I think people are trying to make moves to make sure they don't get left out behind the scenes. And if they do that, I think you could see the realignment settle. But again, to the big picture of the playoff, how it impacted, I think we're going to have to wait now, which sucks. I hate it. I hate that we're going to have to wait now for the length of this contract. It's only going to be more controversial. There's only going to be more accusations of conspiracies. There's only going to be more college football fans that are going to be restless and unsettled. But I feel ultimately we probably will have to wait for the playoff itself. For realignment, I think that might move a little bit faster. But again, if it moves faster, the 4 teams is only going to become that much more controversial. And if Oklahoma and Texas were able to get in sooner, and then you have potentially 3 and 4 teams in the conversation for the playoff, you're going to lose. You're going to run the risk of losing some college football fans if you haven't already.
So there are too many roadblocks to me for me to think that it's going to be moving quickly. And it's going to take it's going to take big settlements. It's going to take like an absorption of a league. It's going to take something to move these along. Those roadblocks include number one, Texas and Oklahoma and the grant of rights, but also when the SEC's new media rights deal starts and trying to align Texas and Oklahoma, like trying to get Texas and Oklahoma into the SEC early. Does that, do you want that to happen before you take over this new media rights deal? Like the way that those two timelines don't line up doesn't sit right with me to think that it's going to be easy. The Big 12 could just choose to sit back and say, no, you guys got to stay here all the way through the 2024 season. You can go in 2025 and it's just going to be awkward. And we're going to continue to collect these checks. We're not going to expand the playoff if teams are going to be in motion. And so because of all these roadblocks, I see taking it to market is another interesting part of this. I'm not dialed into the industry to know whether other broadcast partners are going to jump in there or whether ESPN is so committed to this thing, which, I mean, can we say ESPN created it? Right?
I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
Probably we're not against it.
Yeah. I mean, like ESPN has been the entire owner of the college football playoff, and the college football playoff and the college football playoff era has dominated the way that we talk about the sport. It has changed the way we talk about the sport. They're probably not going to be interested in allowing anyone else into the discussion, but if enough conference commissioners and members of the board of managers and this committee and that committee, if they continue to push that, we can make more money if we take this to market and have multiple bidders, then I don't see a chance where we see an expanded playoff before the full 12 years comes to a conclusion.
I'm also willing to offer myself as a consultant to all the conference commissioners if they want to talk to me about my idea from 5 years ago that includes 70 teams and a 20-team playoff, but the 20 teams that are in the playoffs are all playing in 5 separate 14 playoffs. Wait,
hold on. Did you write this?
Yeah. in 2016, my relegation promotion plan for college football.
Could work. 70 teams. So it was like,
if you're doing what you're doing now to the sport, is there a better, if you're ever going to do it, if you're ever going to adapt that kind of model, this is the perfect time to do it, because you'd make sure that you get your one super league that is kind of what you're trying to go towards already at the top, but you provide other teams access to get into that league based on how things flow. So in the end, what the model ensures is that the best programs at any given time are always in the same league as the others.
So I will say this about college football playoff expansion. I opened the show talking about the calendar flipping. Boy, I really found myself not caring. I'm like, hey, forget what's going on. Like, lawyers, y'all can fight about that. Like, y'all can figure out all the details and all the contracts. It is August. We got camp. We got to talk about who's going to be out here playing on the field. I am so excited to have actual football, because then that can be something that gets college football fans, like, whether you're mad, whether you're angry, whether you like it, whether you don't like it, we're at least going to stop talking about all these hypotheticals and we can start to talk about real football. I am excited about that, because it doesn't seem like anything's happening fast right now. Is that a fair consensus?
Yeah, but you know, it's going to dominate the discussion during the season.
You think it's going to be playoff
expansion and realignment?
All right. Well, you know what?
At least we'll have games to distract us from it at times.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, if they're going to be talking about college football playoff expansion in the middle of the third quarter of Ball State leading Penn State by 3 in very tense Happy Valley, well, you know, I guess I'll just have to put up with it. I've done it before. I think I can do it. I think I can do it again.
I look forward to a lot of third quarter MAC discussions about whether Ohio State and Michigan should join the SEC.
I don't know. Danny, you've been in those booths. It's always just a like back and forth where you sit there and he's like, well, you know, there's this going on. What do you think about that? And then you are put on the spot for just like, let's uncork some takes on whatever the topic is in college football.
Totally. And I was always trying to be really cognizant of you're serving the viewer first. Like, if the game is good, why are we talking about anything else but that game, the upcoming play, what they should be doing, what they're thinking? If the game is bad, I'm in my producer's ear saying, let me talk about anything but this game, you know, like, and I'm talking, 4 touchdowns, second half. Let's turn this into talk radio. But then you're not really serving the viewers, because people probably are watching it for gambling purposes, which was frustrating to me, because I was one trying to tell my bosses, hey, let us talk about the spread. Let us talk about what is potentially happening. And let's not use some obscure reference like, look at me. I know everyone's watching it. And then but you might get in trouble for it. So let's not talk about it. It was like, let's just do it. No one ever wanted to listen to that. So if we weren't going to be able to talk about that, it was always, let me talk about something that I think people will find entertaining, because the game sure isn't.
Yeah. It'll be fun.
Because there's nothing more frustrating than there's a big 4th down or a big decision that has to be made, and you're coming off a promo, because that's a big talking point at ESPN, like, play off the promos when they're, if you're watching one game at noon and they're talking about the big primetime coming up, they want to make sure, and some analysts want to get their 2 cents in on the game that's coming up as well. But if there's a moment that's bigger than that, which is the game you're in, you should absolutely be talking about that at the moment.
Not the conference realignment rumors and expansion plans. And tell me your expansion plan.
Well, what are you doing if you're covering Oklahoma State versus Iowa State and you're covering that game this year? Are you talking about expansion for that crowd? Good luck with that.
This is going to be a great American Athletic Conference game next season.
Yes.
Never mind. This is too inside base. Y'all think that Joel Klatt's going to tee off on the SEC? I feel like he already.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, he's already got him in the sight.
He's already
Fox
started.
Gets every penny out of him. Like they find a way to shoehorn Big 10 and Big 12 teams into their top 10, or like, here's my Heisman contenders. Like, how did we leave off like 3 dudes from the SEC who are the betting favorites, but we have like random dude I love it. Like Joe, and I don't think he tries to hide it, right? Like, he's paid to analyze games, but also to really hype up the properties that Fox invests in. But I guess, I don't know, like, if we're in media, we see it and I just get a chuckle out of it. Like,
yes,
there's Joe Klatt. He's hyping up those Fox properties and leaving off the SEC routinely. I wonder if viewers at home know or if they care. I guess they do care. They probably respond to him quite a bit.
Smart ones do. The diehard college football fans do. The casual ones don't
Like
know.
they put it together like, hey, he works for Fox, so he's going to hype up the Fox properties.
And plus, everybody's
think they see it
convinced that
as-
everybody hates their favorite team anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think that they see it from who he's hyping up. I think they see who he's omitting. And so then he gets just labeled as an SEC hater rather than even like putting together the fact that he's goosing up the people with Fox deals.
Man, does he get out the pom-poms for Ohio State, though, to make sure they're getting in? Because he knows that's probably the only chance they have.
Hey, if Ohio State plays 4 games, that's all you need.
To be fair to him though, like Joel calls like 6 Ohio State games a year, so he's
Right.
very familiar with them, and he was right. They beat Clemson.
That's true. He is Danny Cannell. You can follow him on Twitter at Danny Cannell. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow him at Tom Fernelli. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.